In today's age, would you expect to find a Queen of England imprisoned in some of the most feared places? No, you would not. But in the medieval period, this wasn't surprising. One such queen who found herself the victim of powerful people and an argument over her father's inheritance was Anne Neville, or as she was later known, Queen Anne, wife to King Richard III. Now, Anne was the daughter of Richard Neville, the 16th Earl of Warwick, or better known as the Kingmaker, and she was born on the 11th of June 1456, and she had a sister, Isabel. Now, what's important is that the Kingmaker, it's believed, planned to marry both of his daughters to two brothers, the brothers of the king, and at the time this was Edward IV, and his brothers were George Plantagenet, the Duke of Clarence, and Richard Plantagenet, the Duke of Gloucester. This was opposed by the king, as he wanted foreign marriages for his brothers. Now, Anne and Richard are known to have spent some time together, but the extent isn't fully known. George did marry Anne's sister after Warwick's first rebellion in 1469, and Anne then accompanied Isabel on board a ship when they tried to flee to Calais in 1470, and it was here that Isabel gave birth to a stillborn child. At this point, Richard had remained loyal to the king, and Anne found herself married to Edward, the Prince of Wales, the Lancastrian heir, and this occurred after Henry VI was then reinstated as king. Anne then travelled back to England with her new husband and arrived at Weymouth on the April of 1471, and here she found that her father had been killed at the Battle of Barnet and that her mother had fled into sanctuary at Beaulieu Abbey. Anne then remained with Margaret of Anjou, and at the Battle of Tewkesbury she and Margaret were discovered. Anne's husband, the Prince of Wales, was then tragically killed. It is here that Anne then found herself a prisoner of Edward IV, and she was taken to London and placed into the house of her sister and her brother-in-law. Here Anne was kept for safekeeping at their house in the Cold Harbour, with the intention of finding her a husband, but Anne found herself being betrayed by her own sister. Isabel and her husband had planned to rob Anne of her half of her mother's and father's inheritance, and then place Anne into a nunnery. Anne was even made to dress up as a servant and made to work in their kitchens. You see, Isabel intended to hide her away so that Richard could not find her or rescue her. But that is exactly what happened. Richard did find her, and he did rescue her, and he took her into sanctuary in the church of St. Martin le Grand in London. It is believed that Anne then married Richard sometime in the summer of 1472, and that the divisions of her father's land was then not settled until 1475. You see, Anne's family lineage was actually important to her husband's popularity and his legitimacy as the Lord of the North. Now, Richard was declared king in the early June of 1483, and Anne then came to accompany him shortly beforehand. They had a joint coronation from the 4th till the 6th of July, but sadly, she wasn't queen long enough to make an impact, except she was quite generous to Queen's College of Cambridge. At the time of the marriage, Anne was 15 and Richard was 18, and they made their home at Midleham Castle, and their only son, Edward, was thought to have been born around 1474. Anne became Queen of England on July 6, 1483, but she unfortunately did not live long enough to enjoy being queen, and it certainly was not a happy time for her. Anne's son Edward passed away in the April of 1484 and was buried in the church at Sheffield Hitton in North Yorkshire. This time was a very personal grief for both Anne and Richard, and it also cost the dynasty an heir. Anne died a short while after the death of her son, on the 16th of March 1585, at the age of 28. She had been suffering for years of ill health, and it was either thought to have been tuberculosis or cancer that was the cause of her death. Anne was buried within Westminster Abbey. although this has been disputed and there is no memorial erected for her. But a more recent memorial was set up in 1960 by the Richard III Society on the wall of the Abbey near to where her grave might have been, with the following inscription: Anne Neville, 1456 to 1485, Queen of England, younger daughter of Richard, Earl of Warwick, called the Kingmaker, wife to the last Plantagenet king, Richard III. In person she was seemly, amiable and beauteous, and according to the interpretation of her name, Anne full gracious. Requiescat in pace. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.